Worst prison food in Rikers Island. What NYC inmates really eat. The smell that never left. If you think you've heard everything about Rikers Island, think again. Like, comment, and subscribe, because this story isn't about riots or escape. It's about the one thing that never leaves the island, the smell. The summer heat over New York City can turn almost anything sour, but on Rikers, it does something else entirely. It transforms the air into a weapon. The scent of the East River mixes with rot, bleach, sweat, and food that shouldn't even be called food. It's breakfast time at the Anna M. Cross Center, one of Rikers Island's main jail buildings. Inmates shuffle through the chow line, their faces blank, trays extended. On the menu, powdered eggs, a scoop of oatmeal so watery it slides like soup, and a slice of bread already spotted with green mold. The milk cartons, warm to the touch, smell faintly of sour cream. No one complains anymore. Complaining just gets you marked. Luis Ramirez, 30 years old, had been inside for 7 months awaiting trial. He'd survived the beatings, the lockdowns, and the sleepless nights of screams echoing through the tier. But the food, that's what broke him. He called it the slow punishment. "This ain't about feeding us," he told another inmate, a wiry kid named Tino. "This is about reminding us we don't matter." Tino laughed, dry and hollow. "Then why feed us at all?" Luis didn't answer. He knew why. Because death in here wasn't meant to be fast. 2 days later, Luis collapsed in the yard. When officers dragged him to medical, he was pale, shaking, and vomiting a dark brown liquid. The nurse on duty, a civilian contractor, noted dehydration and possible food-related illness. But no one filed a formal report. They never did. That afternoon, in the commissary line, word spread fast. Luis almost died from that meat. The meat was a rectangle of ground soy and mystery filler, the kind of patty that came frozen by the ton from a supplier upstate. Inmates joked that it tasted like wet cardboard on good days, and on bad days like decay. One man claimed he'd seen maggots in his rice. Another swore he'd bitten into a bone shard so sharp it cut his tongue. Nobody outside believed them, until the photos started leaking. In 2019, a correctional officer anonymously sent images to a local paper. Trays crawling with small white larvae, slimy cabbage glistening under fluorescent light, a piece of chicken with what looked like a human fingernail lodged in the breading. The story barely made a ripple. By the next morning, it was buried under headlines of another fight, another death in custody. But it caught the eye of one woman, investigative journalist Camila Shore. Camila had spent years covering corruption in city agencies, but nothing prepared her for the stench of Rikers Food Service warehouse. She gained access during a routine city audit and later described it as a freezer built over a grave. Inside, she saw leaking meat boxes, vegetables so blackened they looked burned, and rats darting between pallets. A maintenance worker whispered to her, "We clean when inspectors come." That's it. Camila's instincts screamed that something bigger was hiding beneath the filth. She started tracing supply contracts, following the money trail. It led her not just to City Hall, but to a web of private food distributors, some with long histories of violations, others shielded by shell corporations. Every invoice told the same story: high costs, low quality, zero accountability. The city paid premium rates for nutritionally approved meals that inmates said came spoiled half the time. And still, inside the walls, men like Luis kept eating. Or rather, they stopped. Hunger strikes inside Rikers aren't new. They've been happening for decades, quiet acts of defiance that rarely reach the public. But this one was different. It started small, just a handful of detainees in Housing Unit 4 refusing trays. By the third day, it spread through 3 buildings. Guards ignored it at first. They always did. Until one morning, a captain found an inmate unresponsive in his cell, lips cracked, body limp. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything for 5 days. The next day, the Department of Correction issued a statement calling it a minor medical incident. But inside, the tension boiled. Luis, still recovering from food poisoning, wrote a letter to his sister. In it, he described the food as gray slop that smells like garbage juice. He said it made men sick, weak, and desperate. "We trade ramen noodles like they're gold," he wrote. "You can buy peace with a pack." 3 weeks later, that letter reached a legal aid volunteer. Within days, it was in Camila's hands. The words hit her like a punch. She decided to go undercover. Using a fake ID tied to a contractor, Camila entered Rikers' food distribution area during a scheduled vendor delivery. She expected chaos. What she found was worse. A warehouse worker, sweating under flickering lights, ripped open a box labeled USDA approved. Inside, the meat was gray, slick with slime. He shrugged when she gagged at the smell. "They'll cook it anyway," he said. "Nobody checks." Camila snapped photos, recorded videos, even captured the brand logos on the boxes. She thought she was being discreet. She wasn't. As she exited the loading bay, a correctional officer stopped her. "You with the contractors?" "Yes," she replied, keeping her voice calm. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. "Then you know what happens to people who talk." The air between them turned heavy. Camila didn't respond. She walked out, hands shaking. That night, she transferred every photo to an encrypted drive and mailed a copy to a friend out of state. The next morning, she got a call from an unknown number. "Ms. Shore," a deep voice said. "Stop investigating Rikers Island Food Services. You're trespassing into something you can't handle." "Who is this?" she asked. The line clicked dead. That night, she checked her apartment door twice before locking it. 2 weeks later, another inmate died. The official statement read, "Cardiac arrest due to pre-existing medical conditions." But in the commissary, men whispered the truth: he'd eaten the tuna casserole. The one with the sour smell. Camila received a message from a prison cook willing to talk. He wouldn't give his name over the phone, but he said one thing before hanging up. "They're feeding us garbage on purpose." Camila's heart pounded. "You mean spoiled food?" she asked. He hesitated. "Worse. Stuff that's not even food anymore." The call disconnected. 2 nights later, a fire broke out in the warehouse where Camila had taken her photos. The flames burned for hours. Official cause: electrical malfunction. But Camila knew better. When investigators arrived, nearly every document she had referenced, every box, label, and invoice, was gone. She stood outside the smoldering ruins, the orange glow flickering across her face, and realized she was no longer chasing a story. She was chasing the truth behind a cover-up that could swallow her whole. Somewhere inside those ashes lay the proof she needed. And someone on the inside had made sure it burned. The warehouse fire. The smell of smoke still clung to the air long after the flames were gone. It had seeped into everything: the asphalt, the uniforms of the firefighters, even the river wind that blew across Rikers Island that night. Camila Shore stood behind the police tape, her notebook clenched tight in her hand. The warehouse was gone. Reduced to twisted metal and ash. Whatever records or evidence had survived in there, invoices, delivery manifests, supplier IDs, they were nothing but black dust now. A city inspector muttered something about faulty wiring. Camila's gut twisted. Faulty wiring didn't burn from the inside out. She glanced across the scene and caught the warden's eyes, tall, stone-faced, with the kind of stare that dared her to ask questions. "Ms. Shore," he called, voice deep, steady, rehearsed. "You're the reporter, right?" "Yes," she said carefully. "Well, I hope you got what you needed. Because this is now a safety issue, not a story." Camila smiled thinly. "Safety issues don't start themselves." The warden's jaw tightened. "Leave the island." Two correctional officers moved in closer, not threatening, but close enough for her to feel their presence. She turned away, stepping back toward the ferry, her pulse loud in her ears. She knew then that she had struck a nerve. Back in Manhattan, Camilla's apartment felt smaller than ever. She replayed everything in her head: the smell of the spoiled meat, the warehouse worker's warning, the phone call telling her to stop. Then the fire. She opened her laptop and started combing through the backup files she had hidden online. Every photo, every invoice, every lead. Most of it pointed to the same company. Titan Correctional Services, a private supplier contracted to feed over 7,000 inmates daily at Rikers Island. Titan's reputation was spotless on paper. Their public statements were full of words like quality assurance and nutrition compliance. But a deeper look into corporate filings revealed something else. Titan was a subsidiary of a larger holding company tied to several other correctional service providers, including janitorial and maintenance firms that had been accused of fraud before. Camilla's phone buzzed. An email. No sender listed. The subject line read, "You're not looking deep enough." Attached was a single photo, the same warehouse that had just burned down. But this time, the shot was from before the fire. In the bottom corner of the image was a logo she hadn't seen before: Crown River Logistics. She dug through procurement records again. Crown River was a transport contractor hired by the city to move supplies between boroughs. But their address led nowhere: a vacant lot in Queens. The realization hit her like a blow. Titan wasn't just cutting corners. They were covering something up, and Crown River was their smokescreen. The next morning, Camilla met with Detective Brian Lasker, an NYPD investigator she'd known for years, someone she trusted enough to risk talking to. He was skeptical, leaning back in his chair, arms folded. "Food scandals don't burn warehouses," he said. "You're talking arson, maybe fraud. That's federal territory." "I'm talking murder," Camilla replied. Lasker blinked. "You think someone killed over prison food?" Camilla slid her phone across the table. On the screen was the photo of Luis Ramirez, the inmate who'd nearly died from food poisoning months earlier, now found dead in his cell. The official cause was cardiac failure, but the autopsy report she'd obtained through a contact said otherwise. The stomach contents were unidentifiable organic matter. Lasker frowned. "You shouldn't have this." "I shouldn't have a lot of things," she said. "But that man was alive until he spoke to me." The detective sighed, rubbing his temples. "Camilla, Rikers is a graveyard with paperwork. You know how many cases get buried over there." "I'm not burying this one," she said quietly. He looked up at her, something like reluctant respect flickering behind his eyes. "You're gonna get yourself killed." That night, Camilla drove to Hunts Point, the Bronx, where Crown River Logistics supposedly operated. The GPS led her down a narrow street lined with warehouses. Most were dark. But one, halfway down the block, glowed with pale yellow light. Through the chain-link fence, she saw trucks, refrigerated, unmarked, but their plates matched the ones she'd seen at Rikers. She parked 2 blocks away, grabbed her camera, and walked toward the gate. Inside, she could hear voices, low, muffled, arguing. A man shouted something in Spanish, then the slam of a metal door echoed across the yard. Camilla crouched behind a dumpster, snapped a photo through the fence. The trucks were being loaded with boxes labeled Institutional Protein Blend, the same label she'd seen on the ruined Rikers trays. She snapped another photo, zooming in. That's when a flashlight beam cut through the dark. "Hey!" a voice barked. Camilla ducked, heart hammering, sprinting toward the street. Footsteps pounded behind her. She reached her car, fumbled for her keys, slammed the door, and hit the ignition. As she sped away, headlights flared in her rearview mirror. A truck had pulled out behind her. The chase was short but brutal, tight corners, screeching tires. She finally cut down a narrow side street and killed her lights. The truck roared past. When the silence settled, Camilla's hands shook. She checked her camera. 2 photos survived. One blurry. One clear enough to read the shipping label. The destination address wasn't Rikers Island. It was Bellevue Hospital, listed under experimental dietary study. The next day, Camilla met Lasker again, sliding the photo across his desk. "This isn't just Rikers," she said. "They're distributing this stuff to other city institutions, hospitals, juvenile centers, maybe more." Lasker's expression darkened. "You're saying they're running a citywide scheme?" "I'm saying people are dying because someone found a way to profit off the cheapest, dirtiest food possible." He hesitated. "You realize if you're right, this isn't just a scandal. It's a criminal enterprise." Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the caller ID, frowned, and silenced it. "You didn't tell anyone you were coming here, right?" "No." "Then someone did." Outside, through the frosted glass of the precinct window, Camilla saw 2 men in suits standing by an unmarked sedan, watching. Lasker exhaled slowly. "You need to leave the city. Tonight." Camilla shook her head. "Not until I find out who's behind Titan and Crown River." He slid her a piece of paper, folded once. "Then start here." She unfolded it. A single name written in neat pen. Harold Greaves, Deputy Commissioner of Correctional Procurement. "The contracts go through him," Lasker said. "If there's a cover-up, he's the one keeping it clean." That night, Camilla sat in her apartment with the city lights bleeding through the blinds, reading everything she could about Harold Greaves. 30 years in city service, no scandals, no press. But there was one thing. His signature appeared on nearly every food contract Rikers had renewed in the past decade. She scrolled further and froze. Greaves wasn't just connected to Titan Correctional Services. He'd once been a board member of Crown River Logistics. And then her phone rang. An unknown number. "Ms. Sure," the voice said. Calm, deliberate, too calm. "You've been very busy. I'd like to meet." "Who is this?" "Harold Greaves." Camilla's pulse spiked. "Why would you want to meet me?" "Because I think we both know this isn't about prison food anymore." The deputy's secret. The diner was nearly empty when Camilla walked in. The neon sign outside flickered in the reflection of the window, bleeding red light across the floor. In the back booth sat Harold Greaves, the deputy commissioner who held the city's most lucrative prison contracts in his hand. He looked nothing like the man she'd imagined. Gray hair combed neatly, thick glasses, a steady expression that hid more than it revealed. He gestured for her to sit. "You came alone?" Camilla nodded, sliding into the seat opposite him. "You said you wanted to talk." Greaves folded his hands. "Let's skip the questions you rehearsed. You already know I oversee every correctional food procurement in the city. You also know I've been with the department for 30 years. What I don't know," Camilla said, "is why a man like you would risk his entire career to feed inmates garbage. Unless it wasn't about food at all." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You think this is about money?" Camilla leaned forward. "Isn't it?" He took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. "You journalists always look for villains and victims. But what if I told you the food was just the surface? That you've been chasing the smoke, not the fire? Then tell me what's burning." Greaves studied her for a long moment, as if deciding whether she was worth the truth. Finally, he spoke. "Rikers is overcrowded, underfunded, and politically toxic. Nobody wants to deal with it. The food contracts? They're a bargaining chip. A way to funnel money through shell companies and keep the machine running. The city gets cheaper costs on paper, the vendors pocket the rest, and everyone looks the other way. That's corruption," Camilla said flatly. "It's survival," he countered. "You shut down those contracts, half the system collapses. And nobody, not the mayor, not the governor, wants headlines about inmates starving." Camilla's voice hardened. "So you let them rot instead?" He didn't answer. He reached into his coat pocket and slid a manila envelope across the table. You didn't get this from me. Inside were photos, color printouts dated over several years. They showed food storage rooms filled with boxes labeled Crown River Logistics and Titan Correctional Services. In the background of one photo, Camila saw something she hadn't expected: uniformed NYPD officers unloading crates. Police, she whispered. Internal partnership, Greaves said. Rikers feeds more than Inmate. It feeds the system, literally. You think the precinct cafeterias get their supplies for free? Camila looked up, stunned. You're telling me city law enforcement eats the same contaminated food? Greaves chuckled darkly. No, they get the good shipments. The rotten ones stay behind the walls. It's a rotation. On paper, everything's compliant. In practice, it's manipulation. Keep the contracts, keep the money flowing. She felt sick. You signed those contracts. He leaned closer, his eyes cold. I didn't design the system, Ms. Sure. I just kept it alive. Before she could respond, the waitress dropped off 2 refills of coffee. Greaves didn't touch his. He watched her instead, his expression unreadable. You've already made enemies, he said quietly. The people who burned that warehouse weren't amateurs. They were professionals. They work for Titan's parent company, Northspan Industries, a global logistics conglomerate with government contract. You think you can expose that? Camila's throat tightened. I'll try. Greaves sighed. Then you'd better hurry. He stood up, left a few bills on the table, and started walking away. But at the door, he turned back. You should know the journalist before you tried. His name was Jonathan Pike. He disappeared 2 years ago. They called it a boating accident. The bell above the door chimed as he left. Camila sat frozen, staring at the photos. The edges of the prints trembled in her hands. She pulled out her phone and snapped digital copies before tucking them away. Then she noticed something in one of the pictures, a small metal placard on a crate marked, Restricted Biofortified Blend. The name didn't appear in any of her previous research. Biofortified blend. It sounded like food science jargon. But in the context of Rikers, it felt like a code for something else. That night, she called Detective Lasker. I think I found something bigger. The food isn't just spoiled, it's engineered. What do you mean, engineered? Greaves gave me photos. There's a compound called biofortified blend. It's listed on Rikers' inventory, but it doesn't show up on any FDA database. I checked. Lasker was silent for a moment. Where'd he get the photos? He said they came from internal inspections. I think he's scared. Or guilty. Or setting you up, Lasker said. Be careful. These people don't make threats, they make examples. Camila didn't sleep that night. She stared at her wall, covered in notes and photos. The web of connections between Titan, Crown River, and Northspan was starting to form a shape, one that reached far beyond New York City. 2 days later, Lasker called again. You sitting down? What happened? Greaves is dead. Car explosion this morning in Long Island City. Bomb squads calling it mechanical failure. Camila gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. He was the only one talking. Yeah, Lasker said. And now they're cleaning up the rest. You need to get out of the city. But Camila didn't run. She went back to the docks at Hunts Point, retracing her step. The warehouse was active again, new trucks, same logos. But this time, armed security stood at the gates. She snapped a photo from a distance. One of the guards turned, noticing her. For a second, their eyes met. The guard raised a radio to his mouth, speaking into it, and the front gate began to slide open. Camila ducked behind her car and hit the gas, tearing away from the curb. The sound of sirens followed her into the night. By morning, every trace of Harold Greaves had been erased. His name was scrubbed from the department website. His office emptied overnight. City Hall issued a brief statement calling him a valued public servant who passed unexpectedly. Camila uploaded her photos, notes, and recordings to a secure server. Then she called Lasker again. "They're not just hiding corruption," she said. "They're hiding human testing. The food, biofortified blend, it's experimental. Titan and Northspan are using inmates as data points." Lasker exhaled sharply. "If that's true, you're sitting on a bomb." Camila's voice trembled but didn't break. "Then it's time to light the fuse." The taste of silence. The rain came down in sheets that night, drumming on the hood of Camila's car as she sat outside the Rikers Island bridge checkpoint. Red and blue lights from the guard booth flickered against the wet asphalt, painting everything in the colors of warning. She hadn't planned to come back here, not after the threats, not after Harold Greaves' death. But what she'd uncovered couldn't wait. She stared at her laptop screen, watching the grainy footage she'd received just an hour earlier from an anonymous source. It showed a delivery bay inside Rikers. Workers in hairnets unloaded pallets marked biofortified blend, proprietary formula, not for commercial distribution. The label bore the Northspan Industries logo, the same one she'd seen in the warehouse photos. One of the boxes had split open. Inside, rows of silver packets shimmered under the lights, each stamped with a barcode and a batch number, BB42. Soy Max 42. The same compound that had surfaced in other states' prison food scandals. The one linked to kidney failure, liver damage, and neurological disorders. She hit pause, her reflection ghostly on the laptop screen. Then she made her choice. Camila zipped up her raincoat, grabbed her camera, and stepped into the storm. The Rikers ferry dock was almost empty. A lone guard scanned her press badge and frowned. "You're not cleared for the island today." Camila met his stare. The Department of Corrections media liaison approved it. "Call your supervisor." He hesitated, then waved her through. The ferry groaned against the dock, a hulking shadow in the rain. As it crossed the East River, Camila felt the old dread creeping back, that quiet knowledge that once you set foot on Rikers, you were entering a place designed to keep the outside world out. The skyline of Manhattan faded behind her, swallowed by the mist. Ahead, the lights of the island glowed pale yellow through the rain, less like a city and more like a fever dream. Inside the Anam Cross Center, the smell hit her first, a thick blend of bleach, decay, and overcooked beans. The cafeteria was mostly empty now, rows of metal tables slick with condensation. An officer led her to the kitchen area where she'd been told she could interview staff. But the moment she entered, she knew something was wrong. The room was spotless, too spotless. New boxes lined the walls, all freshly labeled and sealed. None bore the biofortified blend name. A middle-aged cook stirred a massive steel pot at the back. When he saw Camila's press badge, his eyes flickered nervously. "Food quality's improved a lot lately," he said quickly, almost rehearsed. "The city's been cracking down." Camila tilted her head. "Improved? When was that change made?" "Last week," he said. "New shipments. New menu." She took a slow step closer. "Who ordered the change?" The man's hands froze on the ladle. "I don't know. Orders come down from admin. From Greaves." The cook's jaw tightened. "Greaves is dead. Everyone knows that." She leaned closer. "Then who replaced him?" Before he could answer, the kitchen door slammed open. A correctional officer stormed in, tall, broad, with a clipboard in hand. "This area's off-limits to media," he barked. Camila flashed her credentials. "I have authorization." "Not anymore, you don't." He snatched her badge, crumpled it, and nodded toward the exit. "Escort her out." 2 guards flanked her. But as they led her toward the corridor, she caught a glimpse of the walk-in freezer door slightly ajar, steam curling out. And from inside came the unmistakable metallic scent of rot. "Wait," she said. What's in there? Storage, the officer said flatly. Camila twisted, yanking free long enough to snap a photo through the gap before one guard shoved her back toward the exit. The door slammed behind her. They left her outside in the rain, badge revoked, soaked to the bone. She climbed into her car, pulled up the photo she'd taken, grainy, half-blurred. But even through the haze, she could make out what was inside the freezer. Racks stacked high with silver pouches labeled BB-42 Correctional Nutrient Study. Her pulse spiked. They hadn't stopped production. They'd just hidden it. She called Detective Lasker. They're still serving it, she said. Biofortified blend, BB-42, it's everywhere. They just rebranded the packaging. Calm down, Lasker said. Where are you now? Rikers. But they kicked me out. I got photos. Her voice broke off as she glanced at her side mirror. A black SUV sat parked 2 rows behind her. Headlights off. Windows tinted. Camila. Lasker's voice crackled. You there? She started the car, heart hammering. Yeah, I'm here. The SUV pulled forward. She gunned the engine and sped down the access road, tires hissing against wet pavement. The SUV followed. Someone's tailing me, she said into the phone. I think it's Titan security. Get to the bridge, Lasker said. I'll meet you at the other side. The rain hammered harder, blinding her windshield. The SUV's headlights flared behind her, closer now. She swerved, barely missing a guardrail. The bridge loomed ahead, her way off the island. Then the lights behind her vanished. She checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just darkness and rain. Her chest tightened. Had they turned back? The moment she reached the far end of the bridge, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered without thinking. Ms. Sure, the voice said. Calm. Cold. You should have stayed off the island. The call ended. Camila pulled over, hands trembling, lungs heaving. She looked down at her lap. The envelope Harold Greaves had given her was gone. She tore through her bag, the seats, the floor. Nothing. The only physical proof she'd had of the conspiracy had been stolen while she was inside. That night, she hid at a friend's apartment in Brooklyn. The storm had passed, but her mind spun in circles. Lasker arrived after midnight, dark circles under his eyes. Their cleaning house, he said. The cook you talked to? Gone. Reassigned upstate. The officer who escorted you out? Off duty, no record of his shift. Camila stared at him. They're erasing everything. Worse, Lasker said. They're moving the program. I traced one of the transport trucks from Crown River Logistics. It left the island this afternoon, destination redacted. The only thing on the manifest was a code, E19. Camila's mind raced. E19 could be a project ID. Or a location. Either way, Lasker said, it's not over. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion clawing at her. If we can't stop them legally, we leak everything. The photos, the emails, the food study. Let the public see it. Lasker hesitated. You sure you want to do that? Once it's out there, there's no going back. She met his eyes. They've silenced everyone else. I'm not letting them silence me. The next morning, she uploaded every file she had, the photos, the videos, the recordings, to a dozen independent journalists and international outlets. She hit send all and sat back, trembling. Outside, the city was waking up. Ferries glided across the river, and the skyline shimmered gold in the morning light. Her phone buzzed with an alert, upload successful. But just as relief began to sink in, a new message popped up on her screen. No sender. No subject. Just one line, you think you've exposed us. But the experiment was never just in Rikers. Camila froze. Then, attached beneath the message, came a single image, a hospital cafeteria, its shelves stocked with the same silver packets labeled BB-42. The last batch. By the time dawn crept over the East River, Camila hadn't slept in 30 hours. Her apartment was stripped down to essentials: laptop, camera, one change of clothes, everything else boxed for storage. The message still glowed on her screen. The experiment was never just in Rikers. Attached was the image of the hospital cafeteria. She zoomed in until the pixels bled together. The same packets, the same code, BB42. Only this time, the shipping label read New York City Health Plus Hospitals Procurement Division. She whispered to herself, they moved it. The city was waking up, indifferent as ever. Taxis honked, coffee carts hissed, commuters hurried past her on the sidewalk, faces blank in the pale morning light. Camila kept her head down and walked fast. Every street corner felt like a watchtower. Every passerby a potential tale. Detective Lasker met her at a diner near City Hall, a different diner, one without memories. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. They're locking everything down, he said quietly. The department just classified the entire food contract system. No public records, no hearings. They're calling it a national security matter. National security? Camila scoffed. For feeding prisoners garbage? For feeding everyone garbage, Lasker said. He slid a folder across the table. You didn't get this from me. Inside were inspection reports from 3 different facilities: Rikers, Bellevue Hospital, and a Bronx homeless shelter. Each noted spikes in digestive illnesses, unexplained rashes, and neurological complaints, all in locations supplied by Northspan Industries. The compound's not just protein filler, Lasker said. It's got a stabilizer, 3G42, developed for military field rations. Cuts hunger. Reduces fatigue. In animals, it suppressed immune function. Camila felt the blood drain from her face. They're testing a drug. Using the poor and the imprisoned as subjects. Lasker nodded grimly. That's what it looks like. She stared out the window. The city she'd loved, the one that claimed to care about justice, felt like a machine made of silence. That evening, she drove to Bellevue Hospital, the same address from the email photo. The security guard barely glanced at her borrowed ID badge. Inside, the smell was sterile, the air humming with fluorescent light. She followed the signs to nutritional services and slipped through the swinging doors of the cafeteria kitchen. It was spotless. Too clean. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed like mirrors. But when she opened the storage freezer, the cold hit her like a slap. Rows upon rows of silver packets, identical to the ones from Rikers. She took a handful, stuffing them into her bag. Then she noticed a clipboard hanging on the wall. Delivery schedule, Project E19. There it was again, the same code from Lasker's files. Next to it, a list of destinations: Rikers Island, Bellevue, Lincoln Correctional Facility, and a new one she didn't recognize: Edison Distribution Center. Camila snapped photos and turned to leave, but a voice stopped her. Looking for a meal? A man stepped out from behind the shelving unit. Black suit, expression calm. She recognized him instantly, one of the men who had chased her car weeks earlier. Miss Shore, he said. You've caused quite a mess. Camila's pulse hammered. Who are you? I represent Northspan's legal interests. You've stolen proprietary property. That's a federal offense. So is human testing. He smiled thinly. You misunderstand. This isn't testing. It's optimization. The city asked for cheaper solutions to its food crisis. We delivered. You're welcome. She took a step back. You're poisoning people. People? He echoed, almost amused. You mean detainees, addicts, the homeless? Let's not pretend the city treats them as anything else. He reached into his coat pocket. For one awful moment, Camila thought he'd pull a gun. Instead, he produced a phone and pressed play. A video flickered to life, grainy footage from Rikers. Marcus Hill, the inmate who'd nearly died months ago, sitting on his bunk, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, they got me," Marcus said, voice weak but steady. "They said the food would make us calm. Said it was medicine. But people started getting sick. Real sick. Tell them we were human, okay? Tell them we were real." The video ended. Camila's throat tightened. "Where did you get that?" The man slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Mr. Hill was part of our study. Voluntary participation, of course. He signed the consent forms." "You forged them," she said, shaking. "Prove it." He smiled again, the calm, cruel smile of someone who'd never been told no. "Go home, Miss Shore. We'll clean this up. We always do." She didn't move. Not this time. Camila hurled one of the silver packets at his feet and bolted for the door. He shouted, footsteps echoing behind her. She sprinted down the corridor, burst through an emergency exit, and into the freezing night air. By dawn, she was gone. So were the packets she'd taken. Lasker met her at a safe house in Queens, his jaw clenched tight. "I sent the samples to an independent lab," he said. "If they're what you think they are, we'll have proof." Days passed in a blur of waiting and fear. Every sound outside the window made her jump. Then, one morning, an email arrived from the lab technician. Subject: Results confidential. Message: Compound contains high concentrations of synthetic appetite suppressants and unapproved neurochemical stabilizers. Toxic at prolonged exposure. Recommend immediate investigation. Camila exhaled, part triumph, part terror. "This is it," she whispered. "We can expose them." She looked up at Lasker. "We go public tonight." But Lasker didn't answer right away. He stared at her laptop screen, at the email, his face unreadable. "Camila," he said finally, voice low, "you ever wonder how I got those files so easily? The reports, the warehouse locations, the manifests." Her stomach turned cold. "What are you saying?" He sighed. "You were never supposed to see this far. My job was to contain you, not help you. But after what they did to Marcus," his voice broke for a second, "I couldn't play along anymore." "You're part of it," she whispered. "Was," he said. "Not anymore. But if we release that data, they'll come for both of us. And they won't miss." Camila shook her head. "Then we go down fighting." Lasker looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's end it." That night, Camila hit upload. The story went live across every major outlet. Rikers Island food scandal, human testing exposed. Within hours, it went viral. Protests erupted outside City Hall. Lawmakers demanded resignations. Northspan's stocks plunged. And somewhere in the chaos, a quiet statement from the Department of Correction appeared online. The Biofortified Blend Program, BB42, has been terminated effective immediately. We are committed to the safety of all New York City residents. Camila read it twice, her hands trembling. She knew what terminated really meant. Evidence destroyed. Witnesses silenced. Lasker was gone by morning. His phone disconnected. His apartment emptied. She sat alone at her kitchen table, the city sirens echoing outside, and opened one last email from an unknown sender. "You did good, Ms. Shore. But BB42 wasn't the only batch." Attached was a photograph, a school cafeteria in the Bronx. On the counter, a box labeled E20. Camila stared at it for a long time, then closed her laptop. Outside, children laughed in the street, chasing a ball through puddles left by the rain. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one."